I was dead. At least that's what the doctors told me when I woke up. My heart had stopped beating. My brain had fallen into darkness. But I still remember everything. I remember kneeling in church, praying as I always did. Then suddenly, a searing pain tore through my chest. I collapsed, my consciousness slipping into an endless void. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I saw myself floating above my own lifeless body. A radiant light surrounded me, pulling me into a realm beyond this world. And then, I met him. God stood before me. He looked at me and spoke. You have seen war. You have witnessed death. But now you will carry an urgent message to mankind before it's too late. He spoke of a terrifying future, a war that would engulf the world in flames if it did not end soon. And when I asked why he chose me, God simply said, "Because you have walked through hell, and only those who have walked through hell can warn the world about it." I was dead, but I came back to tell you what I saw, and maybe to stop the end of the world. March 9th, 2025. I sit alone in my small house on the outskirts of Ohio, next to the fireplace that still holds a lingering warmth. Outside, the winter wind howls through the bare trees, slipping through the cracks in the door as if trying to invade my last refuge. On the table, a cup of coffee is long gone cold, but I have no desire to drink it. My eyes remain fixed on the television screen. The news is flooded with images of the war between Ukraine and Russia. Cities reduced to rubble. Air raid sirens screaming through the darkened sky. Bodies scattered on the streets, buried under debris, and blood. I see young soldiers, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Some of them can't be older than 18, just the same age I was when I first set foot in Vietnam more than half a century ago. A lump rises in my throat. The memories I have fought so hard to bury suddenly resurface, overwhelming me with a force I cannot resist. Vietnam, 1968. I remember the suffocating heat of the jungle, the smell of damp earth rising after the afternoon rain. We, a group of young American soldiers, moved cautiously, weapons always at the ready. The enemy was invisible, hiding somewhere in the thick fog of the battlefield. "Move slowly, there could be traps." Sergeant Carter's deep voice crackled through the radio. I tightened my grip on my M16, sweat dripping down my forehead. Then, boom, an explosion ripped through the air. My body was thrown backward. Dirt, blood, and shattered flesh sprayed everywhere. My ears rang. My vision blurred. When I finally managed to lift my head, the sight before me sent a wave of horror crashing down on me. Danny, a 19-year-old kid from Texas who always told me about the vast fields back home, was now just a broken, mangled mess. His eyes were still open, empty, lifeless. I fell to my knees, reaching out to him, but my hands trembled violently. A part of me wanted to scream, to do something, but another part was paralyzed. I had seen death right in front of me, and that was just the beginning. My name is John Anderson. I was once a soldier, a veteran of the Vietnam War, a man who survived one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. But surviving does not mean being free. For more than 50 years, even though I returned to American soil, I never truly left the battlefield. I was still there, trapped in the dense jungles, surrounded by the deafening sound of gunfire, the scent of blood, and the lifeless bodies strewn across the muddy ground. Those years left deep scars on me, not just on my flesh but in my soul. I had seen too much death. My closest friends fell before my eyes, disappearing into the fire and smoke of battle. There were nights when I dreamed of them, still clad in their dirt-stained uniforms, staring at me with empty, accusing eyes. I had prayed thousands of times, but no one answered. This morning, I woke up to the usual silence. No footsteps, no voices, just the slow, steady ticking of the clock on the wall. The life of an old man living alone was always like this, quiet and lonely. I sat up, stretched, and felt the dull ache in my aging bones. My body had grown weaker lately, but no matter how my health declined, I still held on to one habit, the only thing that still gave my life meaning: going to church every Sunday morning. Put on my heavy brown coat, grabbed the knit cap from the rack, and stepped outside. The March wind hit me the moment I opened the door, carrying the lingering chill of winter. The sky was overcast, gray and lifeless, just like how I had seen the world for so many years. I drove to the church, a small brick building in the heart of town. It was old but still stood firm through the decades, much like my faith. I parked my car and stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the familiar warmth of the sanctuary. My footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as I made my way to the front pew. The church was not yet crowded, only a handful of early risers like me, people who sought solace in the quiet before the sermon. I knelt down, clasped my hands together, and closed my eyes. Lord, please hear my prayer. My prayers were always the same. I prayed for the souls of the fallen, for my comrades who never made it home. I prayed for forgiveness, for the sins I had committed in war. I prayed for peace, so that no one else would have to endure the horrors I had witnessed. But today something felt different. A strange sensation crept over me, like an invisible hand tightening around my chest. I opened my eyes and suddenly, the room tilted. The air in the church felt stifling, suffocating. My heart pounded erratically. I gasped for breath, but my lungs refused to obey. A searing pain exploded in my chest, sharp and relentless, radiating down my left arm. The world spun. I tried to grip the edge of the pew to steady myself, but my legs had lost all strength. The stained glass windows above blurred and twisted before my eyes. I looked toward the statue of Christ at the altar, but the image wavered as if I were seeing it through a thick fog. I knew what was happening. A stroke. Lord. I tried to whisper, but the words barely escaped my lips. Then I collapsed. A loud thud echoed through the church as my body hit the floor. People screamed. Someone rushed to my side. I felt hands grabbing my shoulders, shaking me urgently. He's not breathing. Call 911 now. The voices around me grew faint, then faded entirely. Darkness swallowed me whole. For the first time in over 50 years, I felt nothing at all. I had no idea how long I had been lost in the darkness. There was no time, no space, no sensation of a body. Only an endless void, and yet I realized something strange. I still existed. My consciousness remained, but my body, it was no longer here. I looked down and saw myself. My old, frail body lay motionless on the church floor. People gathered around, panicked, calling for an ambulance, trying to shake me awake. Some were crying. A priest knelt beside me, his hand on my forehead, whispering prayers to God. But I was no longer there. I was floating above them, weightless, free from the pain and heaviness that had plagued me for years. A strange sense of peace surrounded me. Am I dead? I didn't know. But before I could think further, a blinding light appeared before me. It wasn't like any light I had ever seen. It didn't scorch my eyes, yet it was impossibly bright. It didn't burn, yet it wrapped around me like an embrace. The light expanded, growing brighter and brighter until everything else disappeared into an infinite radiance. Then I felt it. A presence, a power so vast, so boundless, yet filled with warmth and compassion. An overwhelming sense of love so pure and deep that I nearly wept. And then I saw him. A being standing in the midst of the light. No distinct form, no eyes or face, yet I felt that it was God. Not the image of God I had seen in paintings or churches. Not a bearded man in white robes. This was something greater, something beyond human comprehension. A presence of pure wisdom, of endless love. Without thinking, I fell to my knees. Lord, there was no voice, yet I heard him, not with my ears but with my soul. My child, you have lived a life of trials. You have fought, you have suffered, you have endured great pain. And now you stand before me. I didn't know what to say. I felt so small in his presence. But he did not judge me. He did not condemn me for the sins of war, for the decisions I had agonized over for decades. He simply saw me. I have chosen you. I lifted my head. Chosen me. For what, Lord? He did not answer immediately. Instead, the world around me shifted. Saw Earth, but not as I had seen it in photographs. I saw it alive, a blue planet scarred and wounded. Storms raged, wildfires burned, lands cracked under drought. I saw war, gunfire, explosions, cities reduced to rubble. I saw people fleeing, children crying in the ruins. And then I saw it most clearly, Ukraine. I saw shattered cities, families torn apart, soldiers falling on both sides. I saw Russia, young men dying, grieving mothers, two nations drowning in blood and sorrow. And then, I saw something even worse. The war did not stop. It spread. More nations were drawn in. The gates of hell opened wider. And then, I saw the flash. A blinding explosion. A nuclear bomb. Then another. And another. Until dozens filled the sky. The world burned. I screamed, but no sound came out, and then it was gone. I was back before God. No, that can't be real, I choked. That is the future if humanity does not change. My entire being trembled. Lord, please stop them. Please save them. I cannot interfere, I can only show the path. Whether they walk it or not is for mankind to decide. I felt something inside me break. Even though I no longer had a body, then why did you choose me? I'm just an old man. What can I possibly do? Because you understand war. His voice was not harsh, but it carried a weight I could not deny. You survived a war. You have witnessed destruction. You have lost those you loved. You know the true cost of war, unlike those who command it. But I am just an ordinary man. No one is ordinary when they speak the truth. God looked at me, without eyes, yet he saw my soul. Will you stand and warn the world? I was silent. I thought of the images I had seen, the ruins, the children crying, the meaningless deaths. I had survived a war, but how many others would never have that chance? I clenched my hands, though I no longer had hands to clench. Then I lifted my head and stared into the light. I will. The moment I spoke those words, the light surged. A force beyond comprehension pulled me in. I felt myself being dragged somewhere, everything spinning. And then I fell, but this time I was falling back. I took a deep breath. Air rushed into my lungs as if I had just surfaced after nearly drowning. My entire body convulsed as though being violently pulled from the void back into existence. Pain flooded every fiber of my being, a stark contrast to the weightless serenity I had just experienced. My chest ached. My heart pounded like a war. drum, and every breath burned like fire in my lungs. I could hear voices around me, someone screaming, hurried footsteps, the sound of sobbing filled with disbelief. Blurred faces swam into view beneath the church ceiling, the overhead lights, casting a hazy glow. I was alive, I had returned. A pair of trembling but warm hands grasped mine. It was the priest. His face was still stricken with shock, but in his eyes I saw both relief and astonishment. "My God, you came back." His voice trembled. I blinked, my mind reeling. A moment ago I had been in the boundless beyond, standing before the Lord, witnessing the grim fate of mankind. Now, I was lying on the cold floor of the church, back in this frail, aching body. I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness crashed over me, forcing me to stay down. Around me, faces full of shock, concern, and awe came into focus. They looked at me as if I had just stepped out of the grave, and in a way I had. I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. The first words I managed to whisper were, I saw him." The church fell into complete silence. All eyes widened. Some made the sign of the cross. I didn't know what they were thinking. Did they believe me? Did they think I was simply delirious from my stroke? But I knew what I had seen was real. I looked straight at the priest and those around me. I died, or at least I left this body, and I met him. A voice from the crowd spoke. "Met who?" I took a shaky breath. "God." A chill ran through the room. Some bowed their heads in whispered prayers. Others remained frozen in shock. I didn't give them time to question further. I had to tell them, so I told them everything. I spoke of the moment I left my body, looking down at myself lying motionless on the church floor. I described the radiant light, the divine presence that wrapped around me in infinite love. I told them about standing before the Almighty, about the words He spoke to me. And then I told them what I had seen. The earth, beautiful, yet writhing in agony. The war, the destruction, the cries of the innocent. I spoke of Ukraine, of Russia, of the fallen soldiers, the children who lost their parents, the cities reduced to ashes. I told them the worst part, the terrifying vision of the future, a future where the war didn't end, where the flames of conflict spread across the world. I told them of nuclear bombs, of blinding flashes that consumed entire civilizations, of the earth itself being plunged into darkness. By the time I finished, the church was deathly silent. No one dared to breathe. A woman covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. A man clutched the crucifix around his neck as if holding onto the last shred of faith. The priest looked at me, his expression unreadable, but there was no doubt in his eyes. "And what did God say to you?" he asked. I clenched my trembling hands. He said this war must end. If it doesn't, humanity will bring about its own destruction. People exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded solemnly, while others remained skeptical. Then a voice from the back spoke up, cautious but firm. "How do you know it was real? What if it was just a hallucination?" I turned my head. A young man, probably in his early 20s, looked at me with uncertainty. He wasn't rude, just struggling to believe. I didn't blame him. I looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "Have you ever been to war?" He shook his head. I nodded slightly. "I have. I've seen blood spill. I've watched my friends fall, before my eyes. I've seen children running from bombings, mothers cradling the lifeless bodies of their sons. I have lived through war, and I know the price of it." The church remained deadly silent. "God didn't choose me because I am special," I continued, my voice steady. He chose me because I understand how devastating war is, because I am one of the few who can see what's coming and know that it must be stopped. I looked around at the people surrounding me, and that's why I came back. Not to live out my last days in peace, but to warn the world before it's too late. No one spoke. Then another voice, soft but brimming with excitement, broke the silence. "You should tell this story on YouTube." I turned. A young woman, maybe 18, her eyes bright with a bold idea. "People need to hear this. If it stays within this church, no one else will know. But if you share it online, millions could hear your message." I blinked, stunned. I had never considered that. YouTube? I had spent so many years trapped in the past, reliving old memories and wars long gone. But the world had changed. Today, if you wanted to spread a message, it wasn't through newspapers or speeches. It was through the internet, through YouTube. I swallowed hard. "Do you really think that would work?" She nodded confidently. "More than you realize." I looked around, seeing others begin to nod in agreement. Some had even taken out their phones, seemingly searching for ways to help me get started. I let out a deep breath. Maybe this was the path God had set for me. Maybe this was the reason I came back. I never thought I would become a storyteller. My life had been filled with years of holding a gun, witnessing war and surviving nightmares only soldiers could understand. I had seen friends fall right before my eyes, heard the agonizing cries amid smoke and fire, and stepped over the cold, lifeless bodies of both comrades and enemies. Never had I imagined that one day I would sit in front of a camera, not to recount the horrors of my past, but to deliver a message from God. But that was exactly what I had to do. I started by learning about YouTube. The world had changed too much since my youth. Back then, to spread a message, one needed newspapers, radio, or television. But now, with just one video, one powerful story, it could reach millions. I had no experience making videos, no idea how to capture the public's attention. But I knew one thing: if I didn't act, if I didn't share what God had shown me, who would? I remembered the words of the young woman at the church. "Post it on YouTube. Your story needs to be heard." So I did. I reached out to a YouTube channel dedicated to near-death experiences. It was a community of believers, people who had faith in the afterlife, in God, and angels. If I wanted my story to be heard, this was the place to start. The channel's administrator responded faster than I had expected. When I briefly shared what had happened to me, there was silence on the other end. I couldn't see their face through the phone, but I knew they were trying to process what I had just told them, trying to find the right question to ask. Finally, they said, "We want to help you share this story." I didn't expect much. I didn't think it would become a global sensation or a viral story. I only hoped that someone, just one person, would listen and understand that peace is something we must protect. I knew I didn't have much time left in this world. That stroke had made me realize more than ever how fragile life truly is. But if my life had a purpose, then maybe, just maybe, it was this moment. I wasn't a politician. I wasn't a person of power. I was just an old veteran, a man who had seen too much loss, too much death. But God had given me the chance to see what others could not. And He had given me a mission: warn them. I had done that. Now I could only pray that someone, anyone, would listen. And before it was too late, before war consumed everything, they would act. Because as God had told me, humanity has lived here for too long. Earth is your home, and you must protect it.